After 8 years of the nomadic life, involving crossing oceans in a 34-foot Sabre, refitting an aluminum boat, and then taking that to the Arctic Circle, we're back at it again with a brand new build. This is Matt, and I'm Jessica. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and join us every week as we start our newest project of building a 42-foot catamaran from the ground up. What do we got here?
This is our shiny new piece in the tent. This is the beam. It's basically going to go between these two bulkheads and right across that opening that's going to open into our cockpit. So it's dividing line between our cockpit and our salon. Going to add an absolute ton of strength. And we have a new batch of methacrylate to bond it down on its way right now. So we're getting it prepped, getting it ready, and we should be able to bond it in the next day or two. So here's the underside of the beam. Now this, to add all that extra strength, they've already put a bunch of unidirectional in the base of this. It's all solid glass here. And then it's cored along the sides, the upright areas. We have to add another 2,400 grams of unidirectional. So it's gonna be 6 layers. Through here. The reason why they didn't do that at the factory is, again, this is infused. They can only do so many layers in an infusion at one time. Otherwise, the resin will thermally heat up. It gets too hot then. So that's the reason why we end up having to do it now, which is fine. It's part of the process.
We ended up skipping out on doing this project yesterday afternoon because temperatures were getting a little too high. So now it is pretty early in the morning and we've got everything prepped, set on a couple sawhorses here. And we're going to start the process by laying down just a little bit of thickened resin to fill in any voids. And we'll be doing those layers of unidirectional 2 at a time at 400 grams each, let it get tacky, and then start on the next one.
After the bottom surface had been covered with a thickened resin, we took our first roll of unidirectional, which we flattened down with a squeegee before coating it with resin. Just to make sure we were fully covering every millimeter of it, we attacked it with both a roller and a chip brush. Then, we would go over it heavily with a metal roller to make sure all air had been pushed out before adding the next layer.
So this is the third and final set of unidirectional. So again, this will be 6 layers total, and we just have to, where are they? Oh, they're down there still. So we just have to, we've been waiting for these to kind of get tacky, which means that we're not gonna get thermal runaway. If we put too many stacks together at one time, use too much resin at one time, it'll overheat and we'll have all kinds of problems. So we had to kind of stagger this out a little bit, and that's just what we're doing now.
Projects where most of our time has gone into preparation when Matt was kind of grinding down the surface and we were cutting out the layers of unidirectional. But we do have them all down now, so 6 layers of that 400 grams adding up to 2,400 together. And you can tell what a nice surface that looks like in there. Gonna let that cure for a bit before we go into the next step, but just having that in there is going to add so much strength and rigidity. And I think we did a pretty good job glassing. It looks pretty.
Now that we have these unidirectional placed in here, our next project with preparing this beam before we can actually bond it down is to embed or kind of adhere these aluminum strips. Since this is separating our cockpit and our salon, we're gonna have the sliding doors in there, and we need a bottom, kind of a U channel is what we're gonna use as the bottom for the sliding doors. And we need something as a backing plate so we can actually bolt it to it. So that's what these aluminum strips are for. Just right along this line here, they'll be bonded in place there. And then once we get this mounted, we can actually screw through that, tap these little aluminum strips, and we'll have a nice backing plate all the way across.
Using a pastry bag filled with thickened resin, Matt placed down a moderate-sized bead where we plan for the aluminum strips to be placed.
Freshly sanded.
Since it was easier for us to purchase the strips in shorter lengths, each one was put down on the thickened resin and firmly pressed down until there was a squeeze out on each side. Lastly, to clean up the excess, a tongue depressor was run down each edge, creating a cove between the fiberglass and aluminum, and also picking up any extra resin. Now that our sill had been strengthened, it was time to cut away the area of where it would slide over bulkhead 6 to fit on each side. We needed to make it so the edge of the sill was in line with the aft face of the bulkhead. Knowing that our bulkhead is 27 millimeters wide, Matt made the measurements forward, marked them, and also measured the distance outboard he would need to cut away from the sill. Luckily, the points where it dips down to follow our chamfered panels are very accurate, so making sure it sat in the proper place between port and starboard was never much of an issue. Reframe the way you listen to music with Soundcore's new first ever audio eyewear. These Bluetooth audio glasses have smart voice control, a 5.5-hour playtime, and are IPX4 water resistant. The 4 speakers located above and behind each ear will transport you with a surround sound experience without blocking you out from the world. Soundcore Frames can also pick up phone calls with noise-reducing microphones, but one of the best parts is their interchangeable frames. For the cost of buying one set of smart glasses through a competitor, at Soundcore, you can put that same amount of money toward a starter set of frames and 5 different faces. At the Soundcore official website, you can find which frames best fit your personal style with a virtual try-on experience. Choose between 10 trendy options to find out what best suits you, or load up on all of your favorites. I already have my 3 of the Harbor for everyday activities, the Landmark Clear for when I'm feeling sporty, and the Marina for days when I'm feeling vintage and girly. By just holding the frames and pulling the audio temples out of their hinges, it's easy to change out your style in a matter of seconds. Follow the link in our description box below and enjoy all the benefits of surround sound in a thin, lightweight frame with polarized lenses, smart wearing detection, and voice control. It is a beautiful day here at Kentmore. We are just getting into fall, and Matt and I are so excited, not only because temperatures have finally cooled enough for us to do like some real work, but we've got a couple of guys coming to visit and help us for like 2 weeks, which is really cool because we can kind of like teach them the skills and then just set them on their own after a few days, we hope. But it is Ryan and his friend Burt, and once they get here, I will let them do more of an introduction. Morning, kitty. You know you're my good girl. And here they are.
Morning, gentlemen.
Excited to show up.
We've got help. So in a few minutes, we'll have them introduce themselves and tell you why they're crazy enough to come spend 2 weeks helping us inside there. So here, we've got Ryan and Burt, and tell us about yourselves and why you're here.
Oh, well, it's pretty simple story. Last year when I was sailing and working on Delos, Brian and Karen were telling us about MJ sailing and all these cool adventures they had done, but the newest adventure that they were on, which was getting ready to build this catamaran. And I guess the more I heard about the story, the more intrigued I got, and then I found I met you guys a couple months later and heard about the whole story about it and started telling Burt about it, and so we just, I don't know, got intrigued enough. We felt like we needed to lend a helping hand.
Actually, he said, let's go to Annapolis and go sailing, and I said, sure, I'll come sailing. And then when I got here, he told me that we were going to actually be grinding and sanding all week. But
With maybe a sail in there somewhere. All right, so Ryan, we know why you're here. How did you lasso Burt into this, or what's your connection?
oh, well, we sailed the Bahamas the last couple of years on a boat that I have keep in Florida along with my wife, and he told me about this project, and it sounded pretty intriguing, and I wanted to see what it was like to try to build a boat like this, and it's been very interesting.
So there you have it, a couple crazy guys coming to lend a hand, and we have some big projects in mind. Our bonding agent is coming, so we're hoping to get a lot done, including putting the transom on, which is huge, and the biggest thing that we want to do while we have a set of spare hands. As you can hear behind me, there is a lot of sanding happening inside the tent this morning. It's just going on 9 o'clock. Ryan and Burt are quite the early risers, which does help in instances like this. Weather has been cooling down. Today and tomorrow are going to be hotter days, so if we can knock sanding out early in the morning, it's a good thing. And pretty much what they're doing is like stuff that Matt and I have been kind of putting off due to the heat. Now that temperatures are cooling, we would have started it ourselves, but great projects to hand off to beginners. Of course, as soon as I start talking, then Matt's grinding in there now too.
There, I'm just standing in the doorway with a drink in hand, watching them gear up, and then...
That's all right, we know that you've been working too.
Pretty sure I turned this thing inside out.
Oh, is it a little dusty?
A little dusty.
Yeah, it's so bad. I have them, they're all in Tyvek, making sure they're all safe, and I'm just in my t-shirt with a mask on, but...
Getting a little grayer.
Yeah.
Oompa Loompa.
Yeah.
I'm an Oompa Loompa.
After Matt and I had spent all the time prepping the sill itself, we used Ryan and Burt to prep the surface for it to go down. And, with everyone's head together, found a great way to apply a downward pressure once we were ready to bond it into place.
Can you smack the bottom one?
I'm afraid to beat on it. Bottom because of the...
Yeah, it's gonna add be a lot of friction there. is enough to catalyze 55 gallons. All right.
All right, 4:46. The clock is starting. It's starting. Are you guys ready to bond?
I'm ready to bond.
Ryan's like, eh.
I'm ready. I like the doggy bag method.
With approximately 40 minutes on the clock, we had planned it out that Burt and I would be filling pastry bags with the bonding agent, and Matt and Ryan would apply it to the floor of the bridge deck under the sill. Once all the surfaces had been covered, we'd then lower the sill into place.
I'll do one more, then I'll call that good, and then I'll try and get the rest in the next bag.
So like there.
Okay. Okay.
Good.
All right, gentlemen. Get your wedges ready.
A few wedges were placed on top of each other between the sill and bars we'd attached to each side of the bulkhead to keep pressure down. We'd also drilled a hole through each side of the sill as well as the bulkhead, so not only was it being pressed down firmly, but it was also being pulled together tightly. Once both bolts were added and tightened, a last hammering of the wedges was done, making sure the sill was level all the way across.
You'll get pulled in a bit too.
Then it was time to clean up the excess and prepare to leave the fumes of the tent, having dinner and planning out our next week of projects together.
Give me your freedom. Whoa, yeah, me to pieces. Yeah, I need it. Want your pandemonium. Life is so easy. Whoa, you love me to pieces. Yeah, I need it. Want your